Good morning, Kuhner country. Okay, very, very dramatic developments taking place. I don't want to jump the gun. Trump doesn't want to jump the gun. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, said, look, I don't want people to get too excited about this. But there was a dramatic breakthrough that took place yesterday between Vladimir Putin, President Trump, and Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky. So here is now the absolute latest. And I just got to say this right out of the gate. If Trump can pull this off, and he appears to be close, they give him the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, really, wow, you want to, this will be one of his great crowning achievements. So, as you know, today is tariff day. Tariffs now are being implemented on 70 countries. There is now going to be a new tariff regime to protect American industry, American manufacturing. But looming behind all of these tariffs is a deadline that Trump gave to Vladimir Putin, which expires tomorrow. And the deadline is very clear. Either Vladimir Putin agrees, the strongman of Russia, either he agrees to a ceasefire with Ukraine and ending the war in Ukraine at least temporarily, or Trump is going to level the Russian economy with massive sanctions, secondary sanctions, and tariffs on major countries that purchase Russian oil and natural gas. And in particular, the two biggest buyers of Russian oil and natural gas are China, number one, and very close second, India. Basically, it's China and India. There are other countries, but the two big players are Beijing and New Delhi. Now, this is the key point. Trump has already implemented a 25% tariff on India. He now is going to add another 25% tariff on India because India is continuing to purchase Russian oil and natural gas. In fact, what the Indian government is doing, frankly, I think it's quite sleazy, to be honest, is they are buying Russian oil and natural gas at a cheap, below market price, and then they sell it on the international market at a profit. They mark it up, and they pocket the rest. And this is now, as far as the war in Ukraine is concerned, it is the sale of Russian energy, Russian oil and Russian gas to China and India that is feeding and fueling and monetizing, funding Putin's war machine. This is why Trump now is hitting the sanctions on Russian oil, Russian natural gas. He wants to hit China. He wants to hit India. If he can now cut off the money supply to Russia's war machine, he will cut Putin off at the knees economically. And essentially, if the oil and gas dries up, if the money dries up, Putin can no longer wage his war. I mean, he can fight for another 3, 4, 5 months. But essentially, the Russian military will not have the economic resources to continue to prosecute the war in Ukraine. So it is an economic body blow to Putin, to Russia, and to their war effort. Now, with this looming over Putin, on top of the fact that Trump now has sent billions of dollars in weaponry through the EU, through NATO, through the Europeans, and they are now buying our weapons and then giving them to the Ukrainians, things have now changed in Moscow. Suddenly, it appears that Putin is more amenable to a deal. And so, yesterday, just 2 days before the secondary sanctions on Russia were to kick in, Putin received Steve Witkoff, President Trump's U.S. envoy, his special envoy. They had a long 3-hour discussion. According to the Russians, they said it was extremely positive, very constructive. How the Russians described it as, we conveyed certain signals to the Trump administration, and the Trump administration conveyed certain signals to us. In other words, wink, wink, let's make a deal. Witkoff then contacted Trump, saying they're starting to now give us concrete details on an end plan, an end game to finish this war once and for all. Apparently, Trump then got on the phone with Zelensky. He discussed the meeting with Zelensky. Here is now what Trump now believes is about to happen. He has now told media outlets that he is planning to meet Vladimir Putin face to face sometime next week. End of the month at the absolute latest, but he wants to do this, I think, jumping and seizing on this momentum, that he now wants to do it as quickly as possible. He is going to meet Putin next week. And then right after meeting Putin, mano a mano, man to man, then there'll be a trilateral meeting between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky. Now, Putin has not met an American president since the start of the war in Ukraine. The fact that Putin and Trump now are on the cusp of sitting down and just meeting each other, person to person, is already huge news. But you add to that the very real possibility that there's going to be a trilateral summit, a meeting directly face to face between Zelensky, Putin, and Trump. Here is now, it's historic. This is what my reading of the situation is. You may agree, you may disagree. For President Trump to invest now so much political capital in and raising expectations, saying he's now going to meet with Putin, it can only be because, for whatever reason behind the scenes, the Russians have made significant concessions and the Ukrainians have made significant concessions that they are now willing to meet at the diplomatic negotiating table. For Putin to be willing to sit down with Zelensky, for Zelensky to be willing to sit down with Putin, and for Trump now to put his full prestige on the line, to say, I want to come in now as the closer. In other words, the two sides are close enough. I'm going to come in now. We're going to lock the doors and we're coming out with a deal. I can't read the evidence any other way. For Trump to just meet Putin for the sake of meeting him, I think would weaken Trump. It would deplete his political capital. I think it would come across as a failure on his part. You don't throw the full weight of the presidency unless you truly feel you are close to the end of the road, you are close to a possible negotiated settlement and some kind of a peace deal. Zelensky would not meet with Putin unless he feels that there's something he can sign. And Putin would not meet with Zelensky, who he dismisses, unless he's willing to sign something on a piece of paper. So listen now to President Trump. Roll cut to Mike.
But we had some very good talks with President Putin today, and there's a very good chance that we could be ending the round, ending the end of that road. That road was long and continues to be long, but there's a good chance that there will be a meeting very soon.
So now he said, look, nothing is set in stone. It's not 100% yet. But he said, as he put it, there's a very, very good chance we're going to be meeting, and we're starting to approach, as he put it, the end of a very long road. This war has gone on now for over 3 years. You're just this year alone, 20,000 Russians dead, 9,000 Ukrainians dead. In total, over 1 million Russian and Ukrainians have either died or been maimed in this war. It is by far the worst war in Europe since World War II. It appears to me that Zelensky now is willing to concede that Russia will annex Crimea and take eastern Ukraine, about 20% of the country, what's called the Donbass. And in exchange for that, Ukraine will then have access to the European Union. Ukraine will get a chance to rebuild its military, and Ukraine will be able to break free from Russian control and dominance. In other words, I think Ukraine is now willing to accept 80% of Ukraine is better than no Ukraine. 617-266-6868. Okay, stunning breakthrough was announced yesterday. I don't want to spend too much time. I'd like to take some calls and then frankly move on because there are a couple of other issues I would love to discuss with you. But look, let me make a couple more points and then I want to go to the phone lines. 617-266-6868. The devil is in the details. The proof of the eating is in the pudding, as they say. So we'll see if there is an actual meeting next week. Increasingly likely that there will be. As I said, it will be absolutely historic that Trump is going to be meeting Putin now since the war in Ukraine began, and that then following that will be a three-person summit, Zelensky meeting Putin for the first time since the war, and with Trump as the mediator. Now, right out of the gate, let me just say this. Trump has now gone much farther and done a hell of a lot more to try to bring this war to an end than Joey ever did. And what I find incredible is that you cannot go a single day anymore in the United States of America where, I don't care if it's the New York Times, it's the Washington Post, it's the Boston Globe, it's USA Today, it's MSNBC on their website, or this is CNN, or whatever, take your pick, where they are not calling Trump either a dictator, a tyrant, or a Hitler. Over and over and over and over again. Okay, there's not a day. And yet, would Hitler want to make peace? Just stand back objectively. Under the first 6 months of Trump's presidency, he is the peace president. He is. Whether liberals want to admit it or not. Facts are facts are facts. He ended the war between two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan. He ended the war between Cambodia and Thailand. Really a conflict in many ways that went back hundreds of years. He brought peace between Serbia and Kosovo. And I'm telling you, I know the Balkans. Getting those two to sit down and hammer out a deal, ay, ay, ay. He has destroyed Iran's nuclear program, giving peace not just to the Middle East, but to the world. This guy has delivered. He delivered peace between Rwanda, just signed a deal, helped them sign a deal, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in the Balkans, whether it's between India and Pakistan, he has now, it's almost a peace deal a month. And now he's going for the big enchilada, Russia and Ukraine. Now, Hitler wanted war. Fascists love war. Militarism is at the heart of fascism. If you know anything about fascism, okay, if you ever just picked up a book and just go through it, just pick a page, and you'll see love of violence, love of war, love of the military, love of conquest, love of blood and violence. Race, blood, and violence is at the core of fascism. And yet you have a so-called fascist who's going out of his way. In many cases, I'm telling you, he is expending valuable political capital in order to try to bring peace to countries all over the world, and now between Russia and Ukraine, the largest, bloodiest war in Europe since World War II. And he has said this repeatedly, over and over again, and he's completely right. I didn't start this war. This war didn't happen on my watch. It happened under Biden's watch. It never would have happened had I been president, and he's right. So I'm trying to clean up Biden's mess. And as he put it, look, I have no personal stake in this. And frankly, he even admits it in many ways. Outside of preventing World War III, the United States, this is a conflict thousands of miles away. This doesn't directly impact us in any way, shape, or form. This is in Europe's backyard. You would think the Germans would be taking the lead. The Brits, the French, the EU, they can't. They're useless, they're ineffective, they're feckless. It's always Uncle Sam that has to ride to the rescue. And so Trump has openly said, look, honestly, from my point of view, this is almost humanitarian. I can't stand to see all of this killing and to see the senseless slaughter of so many young Ukrainian men and boys and young Russian men and boys. It's almost like I'm watching the destruction of European civilization. It's just slaughter upon slaughter upon slaughter. And what's being attained on the battlefield? Hardly anything. As I said in the past before, and it's true, this is reminiscent of trench warfare in World War I. Now, it appears, I don't want to jump the gun, but it appears that Trump's policy of maximum economic pressure on Putin. Remember, Biden never wanted to sanction China. He never would cross China. Trump is now willing to drop the hammer on China, not just for his tariffs, but also for punishing them for buying all that Russian oil and natural gas. He's now doing it to India. So he's now putting the economic screws into Putin's war machine, while also sending some weapons to Ukraine to help beef up the Ukrainians as they try to fend off this massive Russian summer offensive. What is clear is that the mood in Moscow has changed. They want much better relations with the United States, and they are now willing to talk cold turkey. They want Eastern Ukraine. This is what they're asking for. They want what they've accomplished on the battlefield. They want to keep their gains in Eastern Ukraine. They want to keep Crimea, and they don't want Ukraine in NATO. Now, Trump says Zelensky is willing to swallow this if he can get some guarantees from the Europeans, and if the path to the EU is clear, and there is a demilitarized zone that can make sure that Russia never attacks Ukraine or further Ukrainian territory again. So we have the outlines of a deal. Trump now is going to go. We don't know where this summit's going to be held. It could be in Turkey. It could be, who knows, Switzerland. I don't think they're going to do it in Ukraine. They won't do it in Russia. Zelensky will never go to Russia. Putin will not risk his security in Ukraine. I don't know if the two of them would come to the United States and do it right at the White House. We shall see. But it's probably going to be a neutral third site. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, let me ask all of you several questions, and then I want to open up the phone lines. 617-266-6868 is the number. First, Mike, do me a favor. Play the cut one more time. This was Trump. The press corps was stunned. Stunned. Nobody saw this coming. Everybody was assuming this war in Ukraine is going to go on for at least a couple more months, that the Russians now are in the midst of a massive offensive. By the way, the Ukrainian lines in the east are breaking. Russia is on the verge of taking a very key strategic city, and they take this city, all of eastern Ukraine is now going to fall. All of it. And maybe that's why Putin feels he's gotten enough. I mean, I don't want to read his mind, but they are on the verge of winning a key strategic city. The Ukrainians will not be able to resupply their troops in the east. They will have completely consolidated all four regions that the Russians now claim in eastern Ukraine. So anyway, whatever, the point is, people thought this war was going to go on for at least another 30 to 60 days. Trump now has imposed extra tariffs on India, first 25% and then an extra 25% because they're buying Russian oil and natural gas. Tomorrow he's going to announce apparently more tariffs on China for buying oil and gas from Russia. So he is squeezing now the Russian oil sales and their energy supply. Once the money starts to get cut off, Putin realizes there may not be enough left for his war machine to continue to go on. Whatever the reason is, whether it's because Putin has won enough on the battlefield or he just can't continue the war because of this economic stranglehold that Trump is slowly imposing on the Russian economy, whatever it may be, Putin now was very different yesterday with Witkoff than he has been for the last couple of weeks. Listen now to Trump saying, Witkoff, on my behalf, special envoy, had a 3-hour talk with Putin. It was constructive. It was very positive. And I think I may be meeting Vladimir personally sometime next week, followed by a meeting between the three of us, myself, Putin, and Zelensky. Roll cut to Mike.
But we had some very good talks with President Putin today, and there's a very good chance that we could be ending the end of that road. That road was long and continues to be long, but there's a good chance that there will be a meeting very soon.
So that's a massive breakthrough. There's no question. No question. Even the New York Times had to admit that's a massive breakthrough. So even his mortal enemies are conceding that this is a huge development. Now, let me ask all of you, in the light of this, should Trump win the Nobel Peace Prize if he can end the war between Russia and Ukraine? Do you care? 2, the fact that Trump is now going to go the extra mile again to try to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. Is this a valuable use of his time, energy, and diplomatic political capital? Or should he just forget the war between Russia and Ukraine, let them fight it out, let them then decide what the peace terms will be? He should just focus on domestic issues, on problems here at home. And my God, do we have problems here at home. In other words, should Trump even be attempting and taking up so much time and energy, having it consume so much of his presidency to try to end this war between Moscow and Kiev? Do you like what Trump is doing? Do you not like what Trump is doing? And finally, and in some ways maybe most importantly, is Trump now becoming the statesman of our time, the peacemaker of our time? If he can seal a deal between Russia and Ukraine, on top of what he's done between India and Pakistan, Cambodia, Thailand, Serbia, Kosovo, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, neutralizing Iran's nuclear threat, is Trump now becoming the dominant peacemaker, the dominant statesman of our time? 617-266-6868 is the number. Bruce in Woburn. Thanks for holding, Bruce, and welcome.
Listen, Jeff, they're never going to give him credit for anything that he gives his sons of guns. They've given him nothing. They've taken everything that he's ever done and thrown it in a bag of crap. They're not for us. These these people that are here, that it's just crazy, Jeff. I can't believe this guy has done so much for us, so much for everybody, so much for the world. And he's not given any credit at all. They take it away. They Hitler, communist. They're saying what he is, what they are, and we're not it. So you tell me, Jeff, why do we even? I mean, he's just done so much, Jeff.
No, you're right. Look, Bruce, I've never seen a first 6 months like this of any president in history. I mean, it's the energy, the intensity, the achievements, the accomplishments, frankly, the amount of work. I mean, the man is working 16, 18, 20-hour days, 7 days a week. I mean, he occasionally plays golf here or there just to get a little downtime, but the man is putting in grueling hours. I've never seen something, really. I've never seen anything like this. And look, you look at the images of what's happening on the battlefield. It's heartbreaking. Whatever you think about the war, and you know my feelings about the war, we have no dog in that fight. To me, I'm America first. I'm not Ukraine first. I'm not Russia first. I'm America first. And we should focus on our problems here at home. But you just look at the humanitarian scale of that bloodbath, of that slaughter. It's truly senseless. Now, if Trump can put an end to this, Germany didn't, France didn't, Britain didn't, the EU didn't, nobody else did. It's going to be Trump. Now, after all the peace deals that this guy is signing, and it's now getting to the point, it really is one a month, and you're still calling him a fascist? He's still Hitler? Like, you're insane. These leftists are, I'm telling you, these Democrats and liberals are absolutely insane. Like, sir, you have to get your head checked out. And look, you're right. Maybe there's a lot of liberals, a lot of lefties on that Nobel Prize committee. Maybe no matter what he does, but I don't know. To me, you end this war. I don't see how they can deny it to him. But let's say they do. It doesn't matter. In the end, what matters is the achievement, the accomplishment. But no, look, we are living now in historic times. There is no question. And Biden started this war. Biden provoked this war. He took NATO right up onto Russia's doorstep. Biden and Zelensky provoked the Russian bear. They poked him. They poked him. They poked him. Putin responded. And now you've got over 1 million Russian and Ukrainian dead. This is ultimately going to be Biden's legacy. And Trump now is reversing all of the damage, bit by bit, piece by piece. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer, 617-266-6868 if you want to be part of the show. Brian on Messenger made a very, very good point. Very funny point. Jeff, if Trump could walk on water, the libs would say Trump doesn't know how to swim. That's honestly, you're dead on there, Brian. So in other words, even if he makes peace between Russia and Ukraine, they're still not going to give him the Nobel Peace Prize. They'll find some excuse. Now, Larry on Messenger makes a really, really fascinating point. Jeff, do you think that this war would have dragged on this far if the dare litter, if Barack Obama and the Hildebeest, Hillary Clinton, didn't start a Cold War with Russia just to ruin President Trump's first term? Bingo. Bingo. You see, this is, I think, the angle that many, many people, especially the media, are completely missing. What they did in that first term to Trump what now Tulsi Gabbard, to her eternal credit, is now revealing, exposing, and unmasking, is not just that they framed an incoming president as an agent of Russia to sabotage, undermine his presidency, to establish essentially a coup, to overturn the will of the voters, in which they literally manufactured intelligence. They made it up for a contrived narrative that somehow Trump was colluding with Russia to steal the election against Hillary in 2016. And as I've said multiple times, they corrupted the FBI. They corrupted the CIA. They corrupted our intelligence community. Nobody believes them anymore because they blatantly lied. They falsified evidence, intel. They made it up. But what it also did, this was one of the disastrous consequences. Forget the domestic damage that it did. And this was treason. This was a treasonous conspiracy. There's no question. But in terms of its foreign policy ramifications, this people haven't really looked at very much. It launched a new Cold War against Russia. But not a justified Cold War against Russia. Not like the first Cold War, where you had Stalin and the Soviet Union having, conquered Eastern Europe, and the, massive Red Army, right there poised to invade Western Europe. We're not talking about that. The Russians, when it came to colluding with Trump in the election, were absolutely 1,000% innocent. They did not collude with Trump. That was made up. That was made up by Hillary Clinton. It was made up by Barack Obama. It was made up by Brennan and by Clapper and by Comey. And then the fake news media then sold it to the American public. Okay, it was weaponized, and then they propagandized it to the American public. The Russians on this, their hands were clean. In fact, as Tulsi Gabbard has shown through the intelligence that she's revealed, the classified documents, that, in fact, if the Putin wanted Hillary to win, he thought Hillary was going to win. That was inevitable. That's number one. Number two, he said, no, I'd rather have Hillary. Why? Because they could blackmail Hillary. They knew that her health was horrible. They knew that the Hillary campaign had covered up how bad her health was, and that the media had covered it up from the American people. So they felt they had what's called compromat. Plus, they had her on the uranium that she sold to the Russians. So Putin felt that they could blackmail her, and by blackmailing her, they could, at least to a certain degree, control her. So this notion that Putin wanted Trump to win is an absolute fiction. But as I like to say, let that go. The point is, it unleashed Cold War 2.0. It unleashed now a Cold War, a confrontation between us and Russia that was unnecessary, that was based on a lie, that frankly was started by us and by our intelligence community in a way in order to try to frame and destroy Donald Trump. Now, this is where we are. This is what all of this is now coming. This is why it's all coming to a head. According now to the latest bombshell, and Tulsi Gabbard has now confirmed it, Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice have now asked the Director of National Intelligence, her office, Tulsi Gabbard's office, to now hand over even more sensitive, classified information regarding Russiagate and the Russia collusion hoax. They have now opened a grand jury investigation into Obama, the Hildebeest, Hillary, Brennan, Clapper, and Comey. Furthermore, not only now are all of these people under an investigation, and I'm telling you, if it's a serious investigation, they're going down. Okay, there's no question about it. But not only that, but now Tulsi Gabbard has revealed this explosive piece of intelligence. James Clapper, who, by the way, lied under oath, on that alone, he should go to prison. He was the director of national intelligence under the dear litter, Barack Hussein Obama. Do you remember when he testified? Remember, it was Clapper that authorized the massive surveillance spying on American citizens. It was Clapper and Comey that combined to illegally spy on Trump's presidential campaign. Clapper, under oath, was asked, is the National Security Agency, is the NSA, is our intelligence community, are they spying on Americans on a mass surveillance level? Clapper's answer, quote, not wittingly. He lied. Of course it was wittingly. It was deliberate. They were spying on our enemies, on their political enemies, on conservatives, on Republicans, on Trump. Clapper was the guy who pushed the fake WMDs in Iraq under George W. Bush. This is not his first hoax. This is not his first scam. This wasn't the first time that he deliberately pushed a massive lie in order to try to control a political outcome. Listen now to Tulsi Gabbard, and this is true. And I'm going to read to you straight from Clapper's own book, where in Clapper's own book, he admits, we made the whole thing up. We lied about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. No, we wanted that war, and we wanted to smash Saddam to pieces, and so we just said, you know what? He's got weapons of, WMDs. He's got weapons of mass destruction. Listen now to Tulsi. She's on a podcast with Miranda Devine, New York Post columnist. She's very good, saying, no, the Russia hoax wasn't his first intelligence scam. He didn't just manufacture the lie about Trump colluding with Russia and with Putin. He's the one that also came up with the WMD lie that literally led the United States to war in Iraq. Roll cut 10, a mic.
James Clapper was on the team that created, that manufactured intelligence assessment that led to the Iraq war, about the Iraq WMDs. He writes about it in his book, saying that he and his team of intelligence analysts created something that was not there. When you look at his actions then, and you look at his actions in 2016 as Obama's director of national intelligence, you see someone who has no problem whatsoever politicizing and manufacturing and weaponizing intelligence for a political outcome.
Now, she's completely right. She's completely right. I'm telling you, Clapper is going down. If Tulsi Gabbard is not letting this go, it's like her and Trump are almost single-handedly, or the two of them together, are just pushing this to the point now that Pam Bondi has no choice but to investigate. And Kash Patel as well. It's like Tulsi Gabbard is not going to let this go. And she's almost willing this scandal so that finally these people, these deep state criminals and traitors, and that's what they are held to account. Now, I want to go to the phone lines, but you got to hear this. So this is now 2003. Okay, so this is under George W. Bush. Clapper then wasn't director of national intelligence. That was later under Obama. But he was then the director of what's called the NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And you're going to say, well, whoa, what is Jeff? Whoa. How does this make him such a key player in the Iraq war debacle? His job, he was the director of the agency that literally was responsible for analyzing satellite imagery and other so-called geospatial intelligence. In other words, the satellite images that they claimed they saw in Iraq. And it was the NGA's assessment, okay, under Clapper, that they said, no, we've got the satellites. The satellites show that you've got these Iraqi WMD sites. And Clapper said it's got biological weapons, chemical weapons, nuclear weapons. We have the satellite pictures. It's all there. And do you remember Colin Powell infamously going to the United Nations in 2003 in the lead up to the war? And he started to point with these satellite pictures and wave them and say, look at this trailer, and look at this trailer, and look at this trailer. And everybody's like, yeah, they're trailers. No. Our guys say, which is Clapper, our guys say it's got biological weapons in there and chemical weapons. Hell, even nuclear weapons. This cannot stand. We have to invade. We cannot allow these weapons in the hand of Saddam, who could give them to Al-Qaeda or other terrorist groups in the wake of 9/11. But Clapper himself would later concede that the whole story was made up. So he has a book out. This is now in 2018. Okay? So he's pushing now his book. And he now describes in his book, these are his words, not mine, that the intelligence community's assessment was not only wrong, but this is what he said. It was built on a quote-unquote house of cards. A house of cards that he built based on faulty assumptions that ultimately led to the conclusion that WMDs were present in Iraq when they weren't. Quote, this is Clapper, my fingerprints are on the infamous National Intelligence Assessment of October 2002, of 2002, where he says we claimed that Iraq and Saddam Hussein had an active WMD program. Quote, the intelligence community built a case in our own minds, a house of cards, as it turned out, that led us to the conclusion with pretty high confidence that they were there. And it turns out they weren't. And then he said, he goes on, that it was, he goes, I will never forget it. But he then goes on to say that we knew that we were basing this on faulty intelligence and faulty assumptions. But we said it and gave it to them anyway, because the intelligence community wanted a war with Iraq. Dick Cheney wanted a war with Iraq. Donald Rumsfeld wanted a war with Iraq. Robert Mueller wanted a war with Iraq. George W. Bush wanted a war with Iraq. So we gave them manufactured evidence that took this country to war. That's Clapper. That's Clapper. You're going to tell me this guy's not a traitor? Now, here's what this scumbag has done. Okay? And this is just one deep state operative. How many American lives did we lose in that war in Iraq? How many good men and women literally were killed, died as a result of that invasion? Over 4,000 Americans dead? Over 35,000 maimed or crippled? Legs blown off, limbs blown off, quadriplegics, paraplegics. It cost us trillions of dollars. Forget all the blood that we lost. Look at the treasure. Trillions, literally. We've never really recovered from the Iraq War. Trillions of dollars right down a rat hole. Embroiled in a protracted conflict in the Middle East. It tore our country apart. It destroyed Iraq. Not that I'm a lover of Saddam Hussein, far from it. But the fact of the matter is, look what has happened to Iraq after we shattered Saddam's regime. It led to the rise of ISIS, for God's sake. It led to a sectarian bloodbath in Iraq. The Kurds, the Sunnis, the Shias, all of them slaughtering each other. ISIS then ran wild in the Middle East for years afterwards. ISIS was born out of the darkness of the Iraq War. How many Christians did they behead? How many Yazidis did they behead? All of this because people like Clapper and his boss, George Tenet, the CIA director at the time, lied about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. This son of a you-know-what, this SOB is a freaking traitor. And he gets rewarded. You see how the deep state works? You think, well, after this, at a bare minimum, kick this SOB out. At a bare minimum, he's out of a job. No, they promoted him. Obama promoted him. You're going to be the director of national intelligence. You're exactly the kind of guy I need. Because you're a yes man. I say jump, you say how high. And so he then manufactured, which is almost as destructive, the Russia collusion hoax. Brennan and Comey, others were involved, but he was a major key player. Now, we have been on the verge of a nuclear war with Russia ever since the invasion of Ukraine. And in many ways, because we unleashed a Cold War against Russia, that's why we pushed NATO onto Russia's doorstep. It became now imperative. If Russia's our mortal enemy, remember, that was the thinking. If Russia's interfering in our elections, installing a puppet president like Trump, colluding, stealing elections, oh my God, they have a fifth columnist in the White House. They've got, Trump is FSB. Remember that? That he was an agent of Russia. Well, Russia now is our mortal enemy. Hey. So we've got to get Ukraine in NATO no matter what. We got to revive containment that we had under the first Cold War. And so, in an act of naked hostility towards Russia, they literally said Ukraine must enter into NATO. Russia said it's our red line. They said, who cares? Russia's our enemy. Let's cross their red line. And boom, the invasion of Ukraine was born. This is all at the feet of Clapper and Brennan and Comey and the Russia collusion hoax. All of this. There's over 1 million dead because of these people. That's what their Cold War with Russia has now led to. Now, Trump is trying to unwind this war. Trump is trying to undo the catastrophic mistakes that these deep state criminals have unleashed on us and on the world. Clapper deserves to be not only exposed, that SOB, he's got to be locked up for the rest of his life. Am I wrong? Seriously, am I wrong? Now, here's the latest development. Okay, get ready. Here's one more bombshell. According to Kash Patel, FBI director, they have now found a hidden skiff. Okay, basically a secret facility inside the FBI in which there were what's called burn bags. This is where they destroy documents. They try to destroy thousands of documents related to the Russiagate collusion hoax, the Epstein scandal as well. There are also some Epstein documents there as well. But the overwhelming majority of these documents are related now to Obama, Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and Clapper's role in lying to the American people and in manufacturing the intelligence to try to frame Trump as an agent of Russia. And then they try to burn and destroy the evidence. Kash Patel has now found the so-called burn bags, as they're called. And there are now literally thousands of sensitive classified documents that they tried to destroy. Tulsi Gabbard says she's going to release even more sensitive classified information. My friends, if no one else has the guts to say it, I'm going to say it. Obama is a traitor. 617-266-6868 is the number. Linda in Medford. Thanks for holding, Linda, and welcome.
Good morning.
Hi, Linda.
I'm calling to say that I believe they poked the bear with the hope of getting a lot of kickbacks. It was all a big payoff scheme. From my reading, Zelensky, the people wanted to have him recalled. They recognized the country like ours was getting very corrupt. Prior to his being a political figure, he did go to law school, but he didn't really practice law. He was sort of a song and dance man and entertainer. Now, the fire out in the Palisades, I read that 2 of his generals, their houses burned down. And when this all broke out, I believe the people wanted to recall Zelensky, and we stepped in and got a lot of money and destroyed the country.
Well, Linda, just to piggyback off of what you're saying, there were massive protests just last week all across Ukraine. Now, remember, this is in the middle of a war. That's almost unheard of because of the corruption of Zelensky and his government. And so what Zelensky did was, he's a dictator. I know the West doesn't want to hear this, but it's a fact. He's expired. His term is expired. He refuses to call elections. He has crushed the opposition. He has banned almost every political party that opposes him. Journalists are being thrown in jail. I mean, I'm just giving you facts. And the country is incredibly corrupt under his leadership. And so what he did was, there were 2 prosecutors in the anti-corruption agency that they had that were looking into him and that of his cronies. Where all this money is going. All this money that Europe and the United States, that we've given them, that the Europeans have given them, and so much of it has disappeared. And so there were massive protests because Zelensky fired the prosecutors and closed down, literally shut down this so-called anti-corruption agency. And he was so ham-fisted about it. He was so open about it, so crude about it, that even the Europeans, who are his biggest backer, I'm talking Macron, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Britain, Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, literally called him up on the phone and said, like, what are you, a political thug? Like, what are you, running a dictatorship down there? Like, no, you're going to rehire these prosecutors. You're going to restore that anti-corruption agency. You've got protests all over, not just in the capital, all over the entire country. Now, Zelensky eventually had to back down. But the fact of the matter is, the Ukrainian people are not stupid. They know how much money he and his cabal have embezzled. And it's to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. And it's a poll after poll. I mean, it's reported in the Ukrainian media every day. If there was an election to be held in Ukraine today, his most likely opponent would be a general, a former general that he got rid of, who is very popular. He's a war hero, General Zaluzhny. Zaluzhny destroys him 70-30. 70-30. Okay, that's a massacre. That's a political massacre. So my point is, if the elections were held today, Zelensky would be destroyed. Now, my fear, if I can just bare my soul to you, Linda, like I'm in the confessional, okay, to be brutally honest, my fear is, I think Putin really now wants a deal. Not because he wants a deal, but because I think now he sees Trump as serious as a heart attack. No, the sanctions are going to be dropped. He's dropping them like a hammer. they're going to be levied. 25% on India, and then another 25% on India if they continue to buy Russian oil and natural gas. Just that alone. If India stops buying Russian oil and natural gas, and they're their second biggest customer, China's their number one customer, but just India alone, and pretty much Russia's economy tanks. Because they need the sale of oil and gas to continue to feed and fuel Putin's war machine. Now, and Trump apparently tomorrow is going to levy really big sanctions on China and tariffs on China for buying Russian oil and gas. So Trump has said, look, if you, and he said this yesterday, he goes, I told Putin, I said, if you think you're tapping me along by agreeing to, concessions and let's meet next week, he goes, it's not going to work. The secondary sanctions, as they're called, are going to continue. They're coming tomorrow. And you're not going to, China's not going to buy any more gas or oil. India's not going to buy any more oil or gas. Where are you going to get your money? Without the money, you can't buy more weapons. You can't continue your war. I mean, you may for 2-3 months, but that's it. So I think Putin now understands that economically he's under the gun. And Trump has given Ukraine enough weapons not to roll back what's happening in eastern Ukraine, but to save the capital. Trump is not petrified, but he's worried that the capital of Ukraine itself would fall. So he's given Ukraine enough to hold off the Russian offensive. So look, I think Putin is looking at this cost-benefit analysis. And he's saying, my people are dying. My oil and gas, I'm no longer going to be able to sell on the global market because of Trump. The sanctions now are really going to start destroying my economy. You know what? I better get out now while the getting is still good. He can go back to his people and say, we've got Crimea. We've got these 4 regions in eastern Ukraine. And we're not going to have Ukraine in NATO. And I think many Russians would say, okay, it's not bad. It was worth something. We got something for all the death and destruction. And I think Zelensky now is backed into a corner. What's he going to do? My fear is that Zelensky may sabotage the talks. That's my fear. I'm not worried. Believe it or not, I'm not worried about Putin because he has an incentive now to sign on the dotted line. My fear is Zelensky because Zelensky now knows if this war ends, he's in trouble. He's not going to win re-election. And the Ukrainian people are going to ask, where did all the money go? So the one guy that has an incentive to keep this thing going and going and going, to keep the grift going, to keep the gravy train going, to keep the money flowing into his pockets and that of his cronies, is Zelensky. Okay, my friends, big story. And we're going to keep monitoring, obviously, what's happening with Russia and with Putin, and we'll continue to take your calls on that. But this is a very big story. It's getting even more traction almost by the hour. And that is now what is happening in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. And President Trump now has had enough. He is now calling for the federal government to literally take over Washington, D.C., take over the government, take over the running of Washington, D.C., in the wake now of what has happened over the last couple of weeks. Several weeks ago, an intern, a young 21-year-old intern, was shot dead just simply for walking the street. There was some kind of a gang war going on the streets of Washington, and he was caught in the crossfire. Innocent kid, hardworking, an intern staffer from Kansas, and they loved him. Everybody said, great kid, college kid, promising future, shot dead. And then Saturday night, Sunday morning, Big Balls. That was his online moniker. You remember him? Edward Korestein. He's a 19-year-old former member of Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency. And he became a little bit famous because the media hated his nickname he gave for himself, which was Big Balls. And so they ripped him apart. They attacked him. He's actually a brilliant young man. He's also a heroic young man who helped find billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, Big Balls was with his girlfriend, and they went out on a date. When the date ended, you know how it is. You give each other a kiss. She starts heading towards her car. He starts heading towards his car. He then noticed a pack of 14, 15, 16-year-old teenagers, male and female, about 10 of them. And he saw that they were rushing towards his girlfriend. And they were basically saying they wanted to steal her car. It was a carjacking. And he feared that they weren't just going to steal the car. They were either going to assault or rape her. Assaulter, beater, killer, or raper. And so he rushed to protect his girlfriend, ran across the street, rushed to protect his girlfriend. He shoved her into her car, had her lock the door so she would be safe. And then he confronted the teenage thugs. He says, had he gone in with his girlfriend, they would have smashed the windows, they would have dragged both of them out, and either beaten them senseless or murdered them. So what he did was he pushed his girlfriend into the car, made her lock the door to shield herself, and then he confronted the 10 teenagers, these pack of animals. That's what they are. Okay, these thugs, who then proceeded to beat him black and blue. They beat him to a bloody pulp. And according to witnesses, it was very similar to the brawl in Cincinnati. Remember in Cincinnati that there was two white people who were beaten by, 10, 12 of them? And one of them was lying on the ground and was kicked in the head. And they're yelling, woo! And they're all laughing, woo! As they're kicking someone in the head. And the person just, is just, you could see blood oozing out of their ears and their nose is shattered, their face is shattered. Well, according to witnesses, Edward Korestein, Big Balls, was by this point on the ground. They had broken his nose, smashed his face, blood all over his face, lying down, and then they started to kick him in the head. Woo! By the grace of God, somebody called the police, and a cruiser arrived. The second the cruiser arrived, like rats, they all fled. They fled the scene. And they were able to apprehend two of the assailants, both of them 15 years old. Big Balls is lucky to be alive. There are now, if you want, there are pictures coming out of him on the ground. Honestly, I think to me, he looks dead. I don't know how he survived this attack. When I say they beat him to a pulp, they beat him to an inch of his life. Now, President Trump is outraged. He's outraged for many reasons. That interns are being murdered, that Doge staffers are being beaten black and blue, that crime in the nation's capital is completely out of control. Carjackings are way up, robberies are way up, homicides are exploding, shootings, gang warfare, gang rivalry, it is rampant. The streets of Washington, D.C. are not safe. They resemble more Mogadishu, or if you want, Eastern Ukraine, than they do the capital of the United States of America. And Trump is livid about two things. Number one, and by the way, he's completely right on both counts. Number one, that what you're seeing is many of these crimes now are no longer being committed by adults. They're literally being committed by 14, 15, 16-year-olds, teenagers. And the reason why 14, 15-year-olds are now going around shooting people, beating people, assaulting people, carjackings, burglaries, robberies, stick-ups, you name it, is because they do not fear the law. And they do not fear law enforcement. Why should they? There are no consequences. They don't get arrested. In most cases, they're never arrested. If they are arrested, they're released immediately. So they never pay a price. They never go to jail. Or they get a slap on the wrist. So Trump is now saying, and I agree with him, forget the age of 18. He wants people the age of 14 and over to now be arrested and treated and charged as adults. In other words, let them do real time in jail. Let them know that they're staring at a 10, 15, 20-year sentence. And maybe they won't go around, woo, and kicking people's heads in and shooting them and beating them. Secondly, he now says that this Mayor Bowser, the Democratic City Council, have so mismanaged the government of D.C. that our nation's capital is not just unsafe, it is a laughingstock. Homeless encampments everywhere. Drug needles everywhere. Gang warfare everywhere. Trump is now sending them a warning. Either you clean up your act and make Washington, D.C. safe for its citizens and safe and clean so we can walk the streets and be proud of our nation's capital. If you won't, I will. And he will exert his power as president to have the federal government take over Washington, D.C., federalize D.C., and make the federal government run Washington, D.C. Listen now to President Trump. Roll cut 100, Mike.
We have tremendous power at the White House to run places when we have to. We could run D.C. I mean, we're looking at D.C. We don't want crime in D.C. We want the city to run well. Susie Wiles is working very closely with the mayor, and they're doing all right. I mean, in the sense that we would run it so good, it would be run so proper. We'd get the best person to run it. The crime would be down to a minimal, would be much less. And we're thinking about doing it. To be honest with you, we want a capital that's run flawlessly, and it wouldn't be hard for us to do it.
He's right. You would put federal law enforcement on the streets. People would be arrested. They would go to jail. They would clean up the streets. It would actually look like a respectable, safe, clean, beautiful capital again. And so, to be honest with you, yes, I'm with Trump on this all the way. Federalize Washington, D.C. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, my friends, let me ask you a couple of questions. Number one, do you think Trump is right? Should 14-year-old, 15, 16-year-old minors, okay, teenagers, if they commit violent crimes, gang shootings, murder, vicious assaults like what we just saw against Edward Korestein, a.k.a. Big Balls, should they be tried as adults? In other words, they're not going to go to juvenile court. They're not going to get a slap on the wrist. They're not going to have their record expunged. They're not going to just do a couple months in some juvie detention center. No, they're going to do real hard time like they would if they were tried, if they were 18, 19, 20 years old. Is it time now to drop the hammer on 14, 15-year-old thugs? Trump says, yes, I agree with him. I know liberals are vehemently opposed to this. They want to protect teenagers. They want to protect the minors as much as possible. I think if a 14, 15-year-old can do the damage of an adult and can be as vicious and savage as an adult and can take human life like an adult, and if you're now seeing this phenomenon of their packs. There's no other way to put it. In city after city, it's not just Washington, D.C. This is more high profile because it's the nation's capital. But you see them now, they are roaming like a pack of wolves. And anybody that gets in their way, and sometimes it's just utterly senseless. And I'll get to this in just a couple minutes, why it's becoming more and more senseless. But you're just walking on the street and all of a sudden they beat the hell out of you for no reason whatsoever. Sometimes to an inch of your life. I'm with Trump. Throw the book at him. Charge him as minors. Charge him as adults, not as minors. Agree, disagree. The one that's really getting even more attention is Trump's call to now have the federal government take over the nation's capital, the running of the D.C. government. And this is what he wrote on Truth Social in the wake, especially when the pictures came out and the full story came out about what they did to this poor young man, this 19-year-old poor man, a.k.a. Big Balls. Crime in Washington, D.C. is totally out of control. This is what Trump wrote on Truth Social. Local quote-unquote youths and gang members, some only 14, 15, and 16 years old, are randomly attacking, mugging, maiming, and shooting innocent citizens at the same time knowing that they will be almost immediately released. They are not afraid of law enforcement because they know nothing ever happens to them. But it's going to happen now. The law in D.C. must be changed to prosecute these minors, and he puts minors in quotes, as adults and lock them up for a long time starting at age 14. The most recent victim, i.e. Edward Korestein, was beaten mercilessly by local thugs. Washington, D.C. must be safe, clean, and beautiful for all Americans and, importantly, for the world to see. If D.C. doesn't get its act together and quickly, we will have no choice but to take federal control of the city and run this city how it should be run and put criminals on notice that they're not going to get away with it anymore. Perhaps it should have been done a long time ago. Then this incredible young man and so many others would not have had to go through the horrors of violent crime. If this continues, I am going to exert my powers and quote, in caps, and in all in caps, federalize this city. Make America great again. Agree or disagree? Now, let me just couple very quick points, and then I want to go to the phone lines. 617-266-6868 is the number. There's no question whether it's Philadelphia, whether it's Baltimore, whether it's Boston, obviously, whether it's New York City, whether it's L.A., whether it's Chicago, Chicago, take your pick. Atlanta, take your pick. Whenever Democrats run a city, and Washington, D.C. is no exception, they run it into the ground. Where law and order breaks down and crime explodes to the point you can't walk the streets. It's like something. Washington D.C. now is something like out of a Mad Max. You know that the movie that Mel Gibson made, that trilogy, Mad Max. It's like a hellscape. You're lucky. You know you should thank. You know, to me, you walk. If I was working in D.C. every day, our Father, Hail Mary. Before I leave the house, please, God, please, I'm begging you, let me come back alive. Please. This is our nation's capital. He's right. The world comes, you know, they send their diplomats, envoys, whatever, and they look at this third world hellhole and say, this is the capital of the United States of America? Frankly, it's an embarrassment. Now, the D.C. City Council is out of control. They will not punish criminals. They will not lock them up. They will do nothing to stop the gang warfare that is out of control in that city. They are corrupt to the bone. All they want to do is line their pockets. And D.C. now is effectively now a third world city. That's what it is. It's third world. Welcome to the third world. And it's run like the third world. To me, I'm sorry, I don't like to federalize anything, but on this, you got to federalize it. You have no choice. Now, let me just say one last thing. Yes, whatever the Democrats touch, they destroy. There's no question. Okay? There's no question. And they've clearly now so mismanaged this city that people are dropping like flies. And you can see now that poor intern's mom, from Kansas. And I send my son as an intern, 20, 21 years old, and he comes back in a body bag. They sent him back to me in a casket. Why? Because it was 6:30 at night? He puts in a full day as an intern on Capitol Hill, is walking, and they're spraying gunfire on the streets. And the poor guy is caught in a crossfire and he's dead. And this mother says, and the D.C. City Council doesn't even care. They don't care about crime. They don't care about gang warfare. They don't care about drugs. They don't care. They just don't care. What we're now watching is the breakdown of the family. There are no fathers in the homes anymore. These children are being raised, and now these teenagers, almost like they're sociopaths. They have no sense of right and wrong. They have no conscience. As again, they will beat you senseless on the streets in front of a camera and kick you in the head after they've beaten you to a pulp. And they don't care. Human life means nothing. The value of human life means nothing. But there's also something else that needs to be addressed. Yes, it's fatherlessness. Yes, it's the loss of God, the loss of faith, the loss of morality that we're no longer inculcating in the schools, in education, at the home, in the public square. All of that. There's no question. Okay? There's no question. These are savages. What you're watching now, packs of, men and women attacking people almost for the fun of it. These are savages. But there's something else. And I want to give big credit on Fox News to Charles Payne. He's a black conservative. He's got family in D.C. Apparently his niece just was shot for no reason. Again, just senselessly, just shot. Okay? For no reason whatsoever. And that is, I never heard of this until I heard about it yesterday and I did some research. It's called drill music. And you may ask like me, what the hell is drill music? It's a kind of gangster rap that apparently originated in Chicago about 15 years ago, but now is huge, especially among black youth. It's huge in the inner cities, in big cities. All they do apparently is listen to this music all day. Just listen to it for 30 seconds. I think 5 seconds will make you throw up, but for good measure, listen to it for 30 seconds. It's no longer just mother F this, be this, the N-word constantly. It's not just that now. It's glorifying murder. Literally, it's glorifying murder. You listen to it and you go, I'm the biggest free speech person on the planet, but maybe this should be banned. I mean, this is, you're not a man unless you kill somebody. Killing people is how you get your stripes. You see, I've got a red bandana, and I'm going to kill people with a green bandana. And that's just how I become a man. That's power. That's status. That's respect. So go out there and pick up a gun and just start shooting somebody. But they do that kind of rap, with a lot of profanity. But it's the glorification of murder. Not just the violence, of murder, of mass murder, of gang life. And they listen to this and listen to this and listen to this. Their brains are being inundated with this. This is cultural sewage. This is not even cultural barbarism. This is, forgive me, this is cultural manure. And there's no pushback? There's no pushback from the black churches? There's no pushback from local black leaders? There's no pushback from the NAACP. Honestly, where the hell is the non-Reverend Al Sharpton when you need him? Like, this is the one time. Like, you need to go out there and tell them, guys, don't listen to this. I mean, this is literally poison. This is going to get you killed and your friends killed and a lot of black people killed. And let me just say one last thing, okay? And this needs to be said. I want to know where all these phony white liberals are now. And I'm calling you out, Bill in Sudbury. I'm calling you out, Chris in Gloucester. I'm calling you out, Frank in Gloucester. I'm calling you out, Ben in North Andover. You phony white liberals who were going on about Black Lives Matter in the summer of 2020. And you supported you supported the rioting, the looting, the burning, the maiming, the killing. Where's your care now for black people now? Because we predicted this at the time. This audience did, I did, we all did. You defund the police. You undercut law enforcement. And you know who the number one victims are going to be? Minorities. Blacks in particular are going to take it right on the chin. Good, decent, law-abiding black people, for the most part. Okay? And we warned you, you're going to see an explosion in murder, in crime, in homicides, you name it. And we warned you and you didn't care. Well, now, here's the latest statistics. You need to hear this. In Washington, D.C., 96% of those that perpetrate violent crime are black. 96% of the perpetrators of violent crime in Washington, D.C. are black. 81% of the victims are, you guessed it, black. I know Big Balls was white, and I know this intern was white. But the overwhelming majority of the victims of this gang warfare, of this out-of-control homicide and murders that we're seeing in the nation's capital are African-American men, women, and yes, teenagers and children. Innocent blacks are being slaughtered. Slaughtered. And you hypocritical liberals won't even lift a finger. Where are you now? Why aren't you condemning this? I thought Black Lives Matter. I thought you gave a damn about black lives. You phonies, you frauds, you. So, look, I'm sorry. We're going to have to federalize the city. If my only criticism of Trump is stop talking and just do it. I know he's trying to lay the groundwork to prepare public opinion. I get it. But honestly, at this point, just federalize it. And the whole country is going to applaud. The federal government needs to take over the city of D.C. They've got to put a ton more law enforcement out on the street. The answer is not less police, it's more police. It's not less law and order, it's more law and order. Pass laws, you're a minor, you're not going to be protected anymore or coddled. 14 years old and more and older, you're going to be tried as an adult. And let everybody know. So the next time you go, woo, and kick someone's face or head in, you're going to, you know what? That's going to cost you 10 years in jail, tough guy. Or in many cases, tough girl. They've got to restore the family unit, and they've got to speak out against drill music and this gangster rap and this gangster lifestyle. This is a cultural sickness that we as a country now must deal with. Because I'm telling you, our nation's capital, it is out of control. Agree, disagree, and not just the nation's capital. Our inner cities, from Boston to New York to Atlanta to Chicago to LA, are out of control. 617-266-6868. Agree, disagree? Okay, let me ask you. It is the Kuhner Country poll question of the day, sponsored by Mario's. Mario's quality roofing, siding, and windows. Let me ask, hold on, let me just draw it up here. Here we go. Okay, here it is. Should the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., be federalized? Okay, poll question of the day, sponsored by Mario's. Should the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., be federalized? A, yes. B, no. You can vote on our webpage, wrko.com/Kuhner, wrko.com/Kuhner, KUHN as in national ER, if you prefer. I'm always active on X. You can vote via X, my handle there, at the Kuhner Report. It's all one word. KUHN as in national ER. Heather in Rockland. Thanks for holding, Heather, and welcome.
Hi, Jeffrey. Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
Two things. Yes to both questions, but forgive my ignorance here because my question is, well, my one comment first before. My feeling is if you can do an adult's crime, you should be charged as an adult. That's my opinion on that. So yes, they should absolutely change the law and charge them as adults when they commit these atrocious crimes. These kids commit these atrocious crimes. But with the federalizing D.C., I totally agree with that. The only question I have about that, or my concern, I don't know if it's a concern, a question, or whatever, is he goes and federalizes, and you know the stupid moonbat media and the liberals, they're going to say, well, he's federalizing Washington, D.C. What makes him think that they're going to think that, like, he can federalize the states? Do you know what I mean? Then that'll be next.
No, I understand. No, but Heather, look, and this is why Trump is pushing this. It's been done in the past. It's not like it hasn't been done before. In fact, when I went to D.C., this was in the year 2000, they were just coming off the disaster of Marion Barry as the mayor, and it was so bad. I mean, literally, they weren't cleaning the snow. It wasn't just the crack epidemic, the homicide, the murders, the drugs, but literally you would drive in from either Maryland or Virginia, which is where most people live. They work in D.C., but they live in those two states. And the road is, it's a clear road. It's snowing, but they've cleared the roads. And you go right onto the D.C. line and you plow into 3 feet of snow. That's how bad it was. So the federal government stepped in. And they federalized it. And again, they cleaned it up. It was a well-run city. And then it was a big push. Home rule, home rule, home rule. We want to have a mayor again. We want to have a D.C. city council again. We want to be able to run D.C. for the residents of D.C. and not be controlled essentially by the federal government. And so they reverted back to, having a mayor and having a D.C. city council. And it's getting now just as bad as it was under Marion Barry. So what I'm saying, Heather, is Trump can easily point and say, look, I'm not doing anything unprecedented. This has been done before, again and again. And he has the power to federalize Washington, D.C. He doesn't have the power to federalize any other state or any other state government. So, yeah, no, you're right. They're going to holler. They're going to scream. They're going to yell fascism, Hitler, dictator. Honestly, I think the overwhelming majority of the country is going to support him. I think the overwhelming majority of the residents of D.C., including, by the way, the minority communities, are going to back him. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, just to give you an example of how vile. There's just no other way. Just how ugly and vile and dark and evil, really, this music is. I asked Mike, I said, because Mike said he's heard a few songs, and he said, Jeff, he goes, it's unconscionable what they say in these songs. I said, well, Mike, can we play like maybe just 10 or 15 seconds? Just for the audience to get a taste of what this music is and what the message it's promoting. And he said, no, really. He goes, Jeff, we can't. It's FFF, all nothing but F. So all you're going to hear is bleep. It's NNN, the constant N word. But he goes, it's calling for people to be murdered over and over and over and over. It's a celebration of murdering people and of dying. And he goes like, you can't, all you're going to beep, 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 beep. That's all you're going to hear on the air. So that's, now, and if that's what they're listening to, and apparently a lot of them are, and they listen to this day after day after day after day, they're just sitting around all afternoon listening to this, and they get themselves all jacked up, all pumped up, all revved up. And then when the sun goes down and it gets dark, they put on their gang colors and in packs of 8, 10, and 12, and they start to hit the streets. And they're looking to kill people, maim people, assault people, steal from people. It doesn't matter. Rape, mug, maim, kill. It doesn't matter. This has got to stop. This has got to stop. Agree, disagree. Daryl in the great state of Georgia. Thanks for holding, Daryl, and welcome.
Hi, good morning, Jeff.
Hi, Daryl.
I'm trying to unpack this. What I'm about to tell you is for your audience, especially for your black audience, this is going to be like airing dirty laundry. Nobody's going to like what I got to say, but it's the truth. About time somebody say the truth. Even though I live in Georgia now, I was born and raised on the west side of Chicago. Okay, I moved down in Atlanta back in '98 because I got married stationed overseas, and my wife never could take the cold. But I can tell you this right now: the problem with the black community is the black community, and and no one wants to say the quiet part out loud. It's our so-called leaders have betrayed us. Our churches are a joke because half the time we call them storefront churches. When I was growing up on the west side of Chicago, now I see it in Atlanta too. As a matter of fact, I see it all across the country as I travel. You're in the black community because when you go down the street, here's what you're going to see. Cut rate liquors, chicken wing places, and beauty supplies places. That's it. And storefront churches. You will have 5 or 6 churches in the same block. I mean, obviously they're not doing the job because if you're truly preaching the gospel, you'll be affecting the community, and the community is going to hell. But the problem is really going around is the fact that since the 60s, we have been going downhill fast. And that's the truth. Because when I was growing up back in the 80s, I noticed the shift then. We used to dream of being astronauts, physicists, and so forth like that. Now, if you listen to the young youth, all they want to do, if they can't be a rapper, they want to play basketball. That's it. It's like there's no other choice. As a matter of fact, I was called, well, I'm going to tell you, I can't say it on the radio, but I was told I'm not a real N-word because I'm not very good at basketball. And I'm like, how stupid is that? So that's my qualification? It's like, no. Bottom line is, you have father absenteeism. I have known people when I was in Chicago it was ridiculous. The mother was 35 and she's a grandma. She had 6 kids by 6 different guys, and she did it on purpose because she got more money from the state. And now, like I said, for her oldest child was a daughter, and there she was, 17 before she graduated high school. I don't even know if she graduated. She was giving birth. That's why I said she's 35 and already a grandma. And this has become the norm in the black community, that you just have so much fathers not being there because the state will give them money. And it's ridiculous, and it shouldn't be. And I'm called the Oreo because I did it the right way. I got married first, Then me and my wife had our children, and I don't run around trying to speak the King's English in a slang and using ebonics, so I'm called an Oreo. You see, when you try to do things the right way, you're ostracized. They're saying you're trying to act white. I'm like, so in other words, if you do things the right way, you're acting white, but if you do things in a negative light, you're acting what? Well, that's what the N-word means. It doesn't pertain to a color. If you look it up, it means ignorant, uneducated, without knowledge, a down-laden person. That's what it actually means. And so I'm glad I'm not the N-word, because I'm telling you, well, I like to hear some of your other black callers call in and acknowledge this is what's going on in the black community. You don't have the fathers around. That's why you have these little heathens running around acting the way they're doing, because half the time the mothers aren't too much older than the kids, and they had multiple kids, no daddies around to satisfy them. As far as, like, when I was growing up, I feared my dad. I feared my mom, too, because back then, when they say spare the rod to save the child, they practiced that. And trust me, it straightened me out. I was too afraid to do anything. But another thing about the black community that you're not going to like, that I'm glad to share with you, is the fact that I had a very negative attitude growing up on the west side of Chicago toward white people, because this is what our leaders were saying. All my problems in life and will be in life is because of slavery and white people. It wasn't until I joined the Air Force and left this country and I went over to Europe, I was stationed in Germany, that I started learning different things, because, you know, the states over there, well, your parents from Croatia, so the states are joined, so you can actually, on weekend passes, we would drive to other countries. I've been to Spain.
Daryl, can you please hang on? I'm up against a break. This is one of the most important, raw, honest phone calls I've ever had on the air. Okay, let's go right back to Daryl in Georgia. Daryl, I just want you to know, before you continue, I really want you to finish your point. I am getting inundated with text messages and emails. People telling me, Jeff, this should be the caller of the week. This is the caller of the year. This is one of the best calls they have ever heard. So I just want you to know that people are really appreciating your honesty. And we are getting feedback from some of our black listeners, and they're saying finally someone is telling the truth. So, Daryl, please keep preaching on, my friend. So you were saying that what you've experienced, west side of Chicago, that many members in the black community will blame slavery, will blame white people for their plight, instead of just taking accountability or responsibility for their own actions and their own lives. And you said you really saw what America was like, and how a different perspective when you joined the military. You went overseas, you went to Germany. And once you were in Germany, you drove around Germany, you went to Spain, you went to other European countries. Please, Daryl, pick up where you left off.
Yeah. Well, what it is, that you get a better education of what the slave trade was. I called you about a year ago when they were talking about these stupid reparations, and I told you back then, I said, the biggest problem with the black community is the black community, because slavery, the biggest participants of the slave trade was the Africans themselves. That's why I don't try to be like some of these other black people here in America, wearing these African garbs with this back to Africa thing. I say, you can't go back to a place you've never been. You can't identify with these people. As a matter of fact, they thought so little of us, they sold us off into slavery. And it's going to sound real stupid coming from me as a black man, but thank God for slavery, because I could have been born over there with those idiots. You know, look at these. Africa is the richest continent on earth. They have more gold, oil, precious gems, and precious minerals, you name it. But why is it to this very day you see not one African nation has built a ship that's seaworthy, or built something other than a dirt hut? I mean, the leaders over there steal the money, and then they keep it for themselves. They keep the people uneducated, and the people just go along with it. They're happy to have an AK-47 in South Africa, run off all the white farmers, and now they're starving over there. That's a real brilliant move right there. like I said, so I don't try to identify with all these things, because it was when I was in Europe that I learned some of the history of the slave trade, and I was like, well, and above all that, when Desert Storm happened, we were already together. They trained us as a unit, and I realized something. Hey, if I'm going to survive, if something happened, which Scud missiles did come our way, they were duds and went way away from us anyway, because they were not very accurate. I'm like, I have to have what they call the buddy system. You have to put those chemical warfare suits, and you have to make sure yours is on right and your friends is on right, because if there is a chemical weapon in there and then you're not on correctly and you breathe that stuff, you're gone. So you have to rely on the people around you. That's why they train us in the military as a unit, because those are my brothers right there. Regardless of what race, creed, color, anything, we have to stick together and survive together. And it was because I was in the military, I came back with a different perspective. I didn't no longer blame white people for everything that was going wrong. I realized that a lot of the problems I was having, I listened to the wrong people. And I'm going to tell you something, that one of my coworkers, so it's not secondhand from a coworker. This was my actual coworker. He actually went to Operation Push, one of their sermons, political sermons, and it was a bunch of BS, because when it come time to take up the donations, you don't hear a message of the gospel. You always hear a message, keep your eye on the prize. And when I read the Bible, it's seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all things should be added on to you. So therefore, the eye of the prize is to do the will of the Father, God in heaven, and so that we can go ahead and go and be with him in heaven. Not the eye of the prize is get to the White House. See, that was a contradiction. Didn't make any sense, but this guy actually went to the Operation Push, and every message was political, and they start at $25 for a donation, and you can't give less than that. And everybody, and they start all the way up to the big donors. And I'm like, so in other words, everything's about money. They sell us and tell us to be victims. We have to be, because this is how we get money. But the truth of the matter is, your Jesse Jacksons, your Al Sharptons, and so forth, all of them are about getting money for themselves.
Oh, you nailed
it.
Daryl, honestly.
I don't know how in the world they call themselves reverends and pastors, because they're a fine example of...
Yeah, they're crooks.
Some people God called and others just came.
Daryl, I've got to ask you, outstanding stuff. I got to tell you, absolutely outstanding. Daryl, you said really it started with the 60s, right? And I think you're completely right. Daryl, what was it? Because you're right. Before the 1960s, black families were intact. You had a father, you had a mother. They had a strong sense of discipline. Blacks were rising. I mean, I knew you had the South, but leave aside the South and segregation. But I'm talking about, in Chicago, in New York, in the North, blacks were rising. You had a big, strong, vibrant black middle class, hardly any crime in black neighborhoods or black communities. Drug use was almost unheard of. Out of wedlock, pregnancies were unheard of. What changed in the 60s? What was it about the 60s that so eviscerated, so shattered the black family?
It was part of the civil rights movement that accepted this greater society crap with LBJ. And LBJ was there's a old recording. Some people may be able to actually go Google and see it if Google hadn't scrubbed it. There was a Democratic operative on the phone with LBJ, and he said, if you give me what I need, I'll have these N-words voted for the next 50 years and beyond. And what it was, if you ever listen to these so-called black leaders, I don't conform to that black leaders. I mean, I'm black, but I don't consider myself a black leader. I'm a leader of my family, but I don't lead no community, and I don't try to. But what it was, you give them more programs. Black people in America, we have more programs than the Native Americans who own this land. It's like, how many more programs do you need? Stop blaming people for the white man for what we don't do. We have the opportunity. I mean, I left my neighborhood on the west side of Chicago because I knew there was something better. Because I did not want to be like everybody else. Because I knew if I didn't get out of the neighborhood, I would end up. Because by the time I graduated high school, about a third of the guys I grew up with were already dead or in prison. I mean, and that's no joke. And I've known those guys, but but most of them did not have a mother and father. Even though my father died when I was 10, I had bigger brothers, and one of my brothers, was a prison guard, and he's my oldest, and my second oldest, he came straight from Vietnam. I mean, he's much older than I am. He was in a motorcycle gang, and next thing I know, he's a Chicago cop. I'm like, how the hell he become a cop? It's like he was a crook last week, running from the police on his motorcycle. But now he's a cop. But they were recruiting back then. They needed people for the community. So I was always afraid to do something stupid.
So basically, your older brothers became almost like a surrogate father for you, Daryl. And in that way, with them and your mom, they instilled in you these values and this discipline and order that has served you so well. And then, of course, you joined the military, and it really transformed your life. Daryl, this is a message of empowerment, which you've now just said, of personal responsibility, to me, of optimism, of hope, that this is the land of opportunity, and regardless of your skin color, you can rise if you just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And you nailed it. Just be a God-fearing, patriotic, hardworking, law-abiding citizen. Daryl, honestly, best call of the year. And we have the best callers in the business. But this was raw. This was real. You don't hear this on almost any other show. And it takes a very special man to speak the truth, and you're a very special man. Daryl, I want to thank you for your service, and truly, God bless you. And please, Daryl, you got to call more often. Seriously, my brother from another mother, you've got to call more often, Daryl. Daryl, thank you once again. 617-266-6868. Okay, let's put it on the table. Daryl says, ultimately, the black community has nobody to blame but themselves. Is he right? Is he right? Okay, this is from Sheriff Jerry, a good friend of mine on Messenger, and here's what he writes to me. Jeff, all of this is such hypocrisy. The left will say in court to the judge, we know that the male brain isn't fully formed until 24 years old. So they can use the younger age minors, 14, 15, 16 years old, as a justification to lower the punishment for whatever crime they commit. But when the left wants to have uninformed, gullible children as young as 15 or 16 become voters, then the left says they're smart young adults who have as much right to vote as anyone. So, Jeff, which is it? That's a great point. That is an absolutely brilliant point. So, you see, when they want to give teenagers a slap on the wrist after, they murder somebody or literally kick their face in, then it's, their brains aren't formed yet. Well, come on, they don't get formed fully until 24, 25 years old. But when it's time to lower the voting age to 16 or 15 or 14 or whatever, hey, they're just young adults. They have the same rights as adults do. Well, so which is it? Are they not fully formed and underdeveloped, or are they fully formed and fully developed? Like, pick a lane, man. 617-266-6868 is the number. Barbara in Baltimore. Thanks for holding, Barbara, and welcome.
Good morning, and thanks for taking my call.
Hi, Barbara.
Kudos to Daryl. Daryl, everything he said. And I told your call screener that I was going to say things that people were not going to like. Everything that young man said is true. I commend him, encourage him, especially now he's in Georgia, get involved politically and make some changes in the black community wherever you can, because he is definitely on point. My thing right now would be just following up with everything he said, because it's all true. But a solution is what I think would be, it's what's in order. And in the black community, all of these young people that are being slapped on the wrists and sent home, here in Baltimore, it's ridiculous. The crime, it's all over. It's not just isolated big cities. This is happening in every state in this country. They need to activate a junior ROTC. Putting them in jail with hardened criminals is not the case. You're going to end up with a bunch of raped kids. That's what's going to happen in jail. Let's be frank about it. That's what's going to happen in jail. And they'll come out worse than what they went in. But a junior ROTC mandatory when they are first arrested. I've just wondered, why hasn't anyone come up with this for these young people? Put them in military schools. Expand the junior ROTC. That's where they go. They do the crime. That's where they'll do that at minimum 2 years. It'll save so many of them. Just like the military saved so many black men back in the 70s and the 80s. Or before they, when the draft was going on. Not talking about Vietnam. That's another story. But mandatory 2 years in the military has saved so many black men, young men, black and white, but particularly young black men. And that's going forward as far as what to do with them. That would be something that would be constructive.
Barbara, I got to say, that is a really, really good idea. And just to quickly expand and get your take on this, you mean so have them go to essentially military school for 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, almost have like a drill sergeant, right? Get them up early in the morning, teach them discipline, force them to go to school, force them to serve their country, force them to do community service. In other words, they'll come in, teenagers and maybe with a very bad influence, but they'll come out men and instill a sense of pride and patriotism, correct? And order and discipline, correct?
Absolutely. Order and discipline, because they don't have that. What Darrell was saying as far as the home, you got single women raising single women. It's very difficult for single women to raise young men, and especially when they're young and immature themselves. And, they still have a tendency to have the boyfriends in and out. The boys lose respect for their mothers, and they lose respect for women with what's happening. It's to me, it's the only solution that I see. And I think President Trump is the man who could get this done. And I mean, get it done very quickly, very quickly. We've got the manpower. We've got soldiers who could actually run these things. So, we've got what we need to get it done. And maybe reopen some of these, or expand some of the bases, the military bases. It would not be that difficult, and it would not take that much money to do it. It would just the will to do it and enforce it. And he needs to federalize D.C. That should have happened the day after he was inaugurated. It would have made a difference, because D.C. It's an embarrassment to the country to have a capital that people can't walk safely in the streets. That's embarrassing.
Barbara, let me ask you this. I think you're dead on. I think you're dead on with the ROTC. You're obviously dead on with federalizing Washington, D.C. What Charles Payne was talking about yesterday on Fox, and I rarely watch Fox. I just happened to catch it. And so I'm like, really? Drill music? What the hell is that?
He is so worth listening to.
He's smart. He's very smart. I agree with you. Very smart. And I'm like, so I started to look into drill music. I'm like, ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay. So, and apparently I was looking into statistics. Most people who sing drill music either end up being shot or end up shooting somebody themselves. Most people who listen to it, many of them end up either getting shot or shooting somebody themselves, or both. Barbara, why aren't black community leaders, from pastors to, it doesn't matter, black teachers, parents, why aren't they condemning this music? It's as close to incitement as you can come, where, forget the F-bomb and the N-word and all of that. It's be a man, go out and shoot somebody. If you're not a man unless you kill somebody. So go out and it's as close to yelling fire in a crowded theater as you possibly can. Why aren't black leaders condemning this and saying, no, Our kids should not be listening to this poison, this garbage. Where is the pushback, Barbara?
Well, there aren't any black leaders. I can't think of one that I could call by name as far as a black leader in the community. You know, the Jesse Jacksons and the Al Sharpton race baiters are there to just be discounted. But there aren't any leaders. The leadership has to come from in the home. God leading that house and a man in that house leading these children, his family. And those are dynamics that are not going to change overnight. They're not going to change overnight. And that's why at this point, you just got to, it's the hand we're dealt. So you got to deal with it. And to me, getting these kids, these juveniles, when they commit crime and when they know that this is going to happen, this should just become like regular. This is just do it. Where they're going into a junior ROTC program, they're going away from their communities, they're going away to become real citizens because they're not going to get it otherwise. And there's no leadership. There is no leadership. Leadership is in the home. Strong women could, raise men, yes, and very well. I mean, you look at Ben Carson's mother, couldn't even read, and look at what she did with her boys. But those women are rare, far between. We need some decisive action, and I just hope President Trump can do it. I think he's the only one that can, and forget what the Democrats start yelling and squealing about, because that's all they do anyway.
Oh, amen.
You just need to do it.
Barbara, amen. As always, drop the mic. Amen. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Barbara, thank you very, very much for that call. 617-266-6868 is the number. Morris in Boston. Thanks for holding, Morris, and welcome.
Hey, good morning, Jeff. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Morris?
I'm doing all right, but this really strikes a chord. And it's funny, I get up and do my morning business, and I always flip through social media. And the first thing I saw this morning was a video of a black youth football league. And this kid couldn't have been any older than 6 or 7. Runs to the end zone, scores a touchdown, turns around, and starts dry humping the goal line. Simulating that he's having sex with the goal line. And if that wasn't bad enough, next thing you see are the 2 coaches come over and start doing the same thing. And I'm just saying to myself, these kids have no example. And you had said earlier, Democrats, they want to keep the minors out of trouble. But it's funny, right? They want to keep these kids that are committing crimes out of trouble, but they don't do anything to help the kids that are getting raped and molested. Those people, they're walking free that are doing that to those kids. But you drive down any road in Mattapan, Roxbury, people sitting on their porches hanging out, little 2-year-olds listening to that music that you were just talking about. When I was raising my kids, we were listening to the Wiggles, we were listening to hot cold spaghetti, whatever the songs were. Like, we were not listening to let's go down and shoot them up and N-word and that. And you see these kids. I see them when I go to the mall or wherever. It's just like, man, they're trying to dress like thugs. They're trying to look like thugs. They're trying to act like thugs, and they don't have a chance. And there's no father in the home at all. And, so a lot of times when I'm raising my kids, I say, what would my dad have done in this situation? My dad was a great man. They don't have that. They don't have that. I think Barbara, man, those 2 calls, caller of the weeks for sure in competition, because Barbara nailed it. That idea, there's something called Outward Bound that I know a couple of kids that went through, and they came back pretty well straightened out. And that was just like a tough camping trip. You stick these kids in a military academy where they'll have a father figure in the form of a drill instructor. They'll grow to learn to respect that man. And, you do your punishments. Okay. Oh, you don't want to listen? All right. Start running. Oh, you're not going to run? Okay. We'll find something worse for you to do. She's 100% right. You throw them in jail, they're just going to get raped, and they're going to come out even worse. And
I agree. No, I got to tell you more. She really convinced me. I got to tell you, she's one of our key callers. I mean, she's just a dynamite caller. And Morris, I want to go back to something you said, because I think you, along with Daryl and and Barbara, I've really put your finger on it. You need a strong father in the home. And Barbara's right. There are exceptional women that can raise exceptional boys. But that's the exception. It's not the norm. It's hard. It's very hard. I know because single women have told me. Daughters, maybe. But, Morris, look, you went through it. I went through it. My Ashton now is 15. He's almost as strong as I am. Really, all kidding aside. He's 15. He's, you know how it is. He's a teenager, but big head, big shoulders, broad shoulders. He's getting muscular now. He doesn't fear his mother. There's just no fear. She can hit him till the cows come home. He's going to laugh at her. So you need a strong hand. You need a strong father in the house to impose discipline, to instill some fear, set an example. And even now, and he's a good kid. I'm not saying he's a bad kid. He's a very good kid. But whenever he gets fresh, whenever he starts talking back to his mom, whenever he starts picking on his sister, I raise my voice. I give him heck. And he fears me because I'm a man. That's the only reason. And okay, he fears me. He respects me. And so if you don't have that father figure in the house, you can't control teenage men, teenage males in particular. And I'll never forget this, Morris, and I'll give you the last word. The great conservative historian, I think the greatest historian that ever lived, Paul Johnson, famously said, the most dangerous weapon in the world, he goes, if you understand history, it's not a nuclear bomb, it's not a Sherman tank, it's not an AK-47, it's a teenage male, 16, 17, 18 years old. Look at all the wars going back since the beginning of, humanity. The most dangerous weapon is a teenage male. You give them a sword, you give them a knife, you give them a gun, you give them whatever. And they will rampage and kill and murder and maim and destroy like no one else can. And that's just a fact. And, to prove it, he just said, look, let me ask all of you. It was at a conference. He said this. And he asked the audience, he goes, let me ask you this. Okay? He goes, I don't care what the race is. Forget the race, forget the skin color. You're walking down after an evening with your friends. It's about 11, 12 o'clock at night. And as you're walking down, you see, on the one hand, two couples, a man and a woman, or you see 4 teenage males. What scares you more? What scares you more? There's 2 men there, 2 adult men, 2 women, adults, and 4 teenage males. What scares you more? And you could tell the whole audience was like 4 teenage males. He goes, you see my point? A teenage male is the most dangerous weapon in the world. That's why you need a mother and a father, obviously. That's why, but in particular, a strong father. And that's why I thought Barbara and Daryl nailed it, and you've nailed it. In the end, there's only so much government can do. You can throw all the education money, all the welfare money, all the money in the world. It doesn't matter. It comes from the home. It starts in the home. We used to understand that. We don't understand that anymore. Final word to you, Morris.
Yeah, Jeff, it boils down to consequences. And, what went down in 2020 took away all consequences, right? People were, it's not their fault, slavery, whatever it may be. Consequences disappeared in 2020. Not that there were a lot of consequences before, but there were consequences. This is when they had the no bail and, let murderers out for $1, whatever it may be. When you take consequences out of the equation, you have to have consequences, accountability, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, in relationships, whatever it may be. You mess up, there's got to be consequences. And there are no consequences for these kids in the home with the law. And they've been given a free pass because of some made up nonsense that they're being held back. Every single group, the Chinese, Indians, Spanish, they are able to pull themselves out of this hole. But for some reason, the Democrat Party has been able to latch on to Black America and keep them down by saying, you can't do it. I mean, think about voter ID laws, Jeff. They literally went out there and said, black people are incapable of going out and getting an ID to vote. And they exploited the black community, not because they actually believed that black people are incapable to go out and vote, but because they wanted to make it possible for people who are here illegally to vote. So they exploited the black community, made them look like morons, that they can't even get a license or an ID to vote just to make it possible for illegals to vote. So they just exploit these people, and it's not going to stop, Jeff. It's going to take generations to clean this up at this point. I mean, seriously, like I said, take a ride through Boston, take a ride through downtown Baltimore, New York. I mean, there's no changing. You're not going to put all these kids in a military academy, and a lot of them, are 18, 19, 20 years old. They're lost causes. There's nothing that's going to fix them. It sounds horrible to say that, but it's not. Maybe one or two in a group are going to come out of it, but the majority of them are just going to end up either in jail, dead, or living on the streets, or living off our tax dollars. And that's it.
Morris, I don't have much time left before the break, but I want to ask you this in all sincerity. Not that you would do this, but I just want to make a hypothetical and to clinch your point. God forbid you're 16, 17 years old, and you decide to go out with your friends, a pack, 10 of them, and you start mugging people, beating people, carjacking people. And you say, here, to this big balls guy, okay, Edward Corristine, with his girlfriend. And you're like, hey, you know what? We'll slap her around. We'll beat the hell out of him. We'll steal the car. And you're kicking him in the head. Literally. Woo! And you're the one kicking his head in. And the cops arrest you. And your dad gets a call and said, I want you to know, Mr. I'll just call you Morris Jones. Just Mr. Jones, your son Morris, he just, helped beat the hell out of a 19-year-old guy and wanted to steal his girlfriend's car and was actually kicking his head in. Literally kicking his face in. What would your father have done?
Even want to think about it. Just the thought of what he would have done to me makes me shiver. And you know what's funny you say that? Like my son, he's 19 now. And, 17, 18, he was getting, like you were saying, Ashton, getting a little disrespectful with his mother. And I said to him, hey, when you mouth off to mom, you're mouthing off to a big guy's girlfriend right now. And what's going to happen when you mouth off to a big guy's girlfriend? He's going to kick the crap out of you. I said, so you keep talking to mom like that. You keep doing what you're doing. You and I, we're going to go out back and we're going to fight like men. That's what's going to go down. And he always said, Dad, what does that mean? I go, it means I'm going above the waist. and he knew exactly what it was, and it stopped it.
No, I know. Same thing with Ashton. Okay, Dad. I'm sorry, Dad. Morris, dynamite call. Morris, thank you very much for that. Really nice call. No, it's true. I mean, it's just a fact. That's, again, you may be blessed with a very good, teenage son who, doesn't mouth back or, be fresh with his mom or his parents, but, most teenage boys are not like that. They need that firm hand. And Morris nailed it. They've got to know consequences. And there's going to be severe consequences, firm consequences, consistent consequences. And then they eventually grow out of it. And they do, but those values stay with them. That's the point. And they become men and they realize, well, that's how you're supposed to behave. And I'm going to be responsible for my behavior and my actions. So, but you let it go, and they become very dangerous very fast. 617-266-6868 is the number. I just, so that people, know where I'm coming from on this. In the Kuhner home, and I've drilled this into Ashton and Ava's head 1,000 times. And I tell both kids over and over again, there's only one iron rule in this house. And they're looking at me like, yeah. and I point to Grace. I go, you see? And they go like, yeah. Okay. If mommy's happy, daddy's happy. And if mommy's unhappy, and I go to them, who's unhappy? And they go, well, you, Dad. That's right. And who's the one person you don't want to see unhappy? They go, you. I go, your life is very simple. So when I come home, if my wife is smiling ear to ear, I go, if mommy's happy, I'm happy. If I'm happy, things are good for you. But if mommy's not happy, then I'm not happy. And you don't want me unhappy. And literally, that philosophy has guided us now for, the last 15 years. Ashton is 15. Ava's going to be 13 in September. And so in the end, yes, Grace runs much of the home. There's no question. Grace does discipline the children as well. No question. But I'm telling you, you need a firm hand from the father. The firm hand from the father greases all the wheels. 617-266-6868 is the number. Jimmy in Dorchester. Thanks for holding, Jimmy, and welcome.
Jeff, I was going to talk with you about Poland and Ukraine, but Jeff, I got my relatives here from Poland and from England. You know where they wanted to go? They came here, but I'm going to take them to other places. They wanted to go to Washington. I had already set up to take them with friends of mine to Washington, D.C. With this going on, I hope Trump does it this month. He puts the does it on the federal. You know why? I'm embarrassed to bring them there and show them the monuments and be in fear that something's going to happen. We're going to have a vehicle stolen. We're going to either get mugged or robbed. That's how embarrassed I am. And I've always told them they love this country. They wanted to see the White House. They wanted to see the Washington Monument. They wanted to see the Lincoln Monument, but I can't do it.
No, I know, Jimmy. That's Trump's point. And, look, his people are listening, and you're literally making Trump's argument. This is what Trump's saying. He goes, look, it's embarrassing for our country, right? You, me, everybody. We want to go to Washington, too, to see our capital. I mean, I lived there for 10 years, but you know what I mean? Look, Ashton and Ava have never been to Washington. I'd love to take them. Really, I would. Show them the Jefferson Memorial, show them the White House. I could go on and on. There's so much history. It's our nation's capital. It's too dangerous. Now, look, I'm not going to exaggerate. Honestly, if you're in the daytime, if you basically until about 6 in the evening, you're fine. But anything after 6 o'clock, forget it. Stay in your hotel. I mean, is that the way to live? And it's okay, fine. You're not going to get shot on the streets, generally. You're not going to get shot between 9 and 6 or 8 and 6, 8 in the morning till 6 in the evening. But then you go in front of Union Station, which is the big hub. That's where the metro is, the subway, and it's about 10, 15-minute walk to Capitol Hill. Homeless encampments everywhere. Feces, people urinating everywhere. You've got, drug addicts shooting up everywhere. You've got the crazy Palestinian protesters now with the Hamas flags camped permanently with all these slogans, death to the Jews and from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free and on and on. Who wants your children and your family to see this? It's just come on. This is the capital of the United States of America. Hey, it looks like something, I told you, like Mogadishu or, I don't know, Caracas, Venezuela. It looks like a third world dump. So it's embarrassing. But then you add to this, you got your relatives. Exactly. This is Trump's point. People from Poland, people from England. So what? They're going to come back. They're going to go back to Poland. They're going to go back to England. They're going to say, yeah, we saw the nation's capital. It sucks. They're going to be like, what, America? No. Yeah, I'm telling you. It's like visiting a third world country. It's a disgrace. And that's Trump's point. And by the way, just on a crude level, you know how much tourism we're losing because of this? That's a lot of money. And it's not just money to Washington, D.C. Look, most people are exactly like you, Jimmy. They have relatives who come, who will go to the city that, their relative lives in, and they say, please, let's go to the Capitol. Or let's go to the Capitol, and then from the Capitol we'll go wherever. We'll go to Cape Cod. We'll go wherever. We'll go to Myrtle Beach. But we got to see the Capitol. So a lot of people come from around the world to see the Capitol. and then they go and visit the rest of the United States, or whatever. Go to the United States, the rest of the United States, and then eventually visit the capital. This is driving away tourists, man. Like, this is costing us a ton of money. And honestly, Jimmy, that city council up there in Washington, D.C., you tell your Polish relatives from the Kuhner man, they're worse than those freaking communists. I swear to God, even the communists in Poland would not allow murdering and drug dealing and defecating on the streets of Warsaw. I'm telling you, I know I'm right. Even they wouldn't allow it. These people in the city council, they're all for sale. They're all for sale. You just put enough money in their pocket and blank you. 617-266-6868 is the number. Maggie in Amesbury. Thanks for holding, Maggie, and welcome.
Hi, good morning, Jeff.
Hi, Maggie.
I just wanted to say that I agree with all the callers. You know, most of this stuff starts in the home, in the community. But, you know, we also pay taxes for people like me who work for the government and rely on the criminal justice system. Sadly, I think that due to a number of reasons, resources, disenchantment maybe with it, and a little bit of laziness, these people, so many people are getting off scot-free. I think part of my job is I look at people's backgrounds, quarries, fingerprints, and I think the public would be shocked if they knew people with lists of some violent crimes and you see dismissed. I mean, I don't quite understand what's happening, but we're failing not only the people that are committing the crimes because they're never going to suffer consequences, they're never going to learn. But we're failing the very public who depend on us to keep this, you know, the public safe, the community safe. It's just, I don't know, the court systems, the attorneys, everything is just not working correctly right now. It needs a whole reset. I don't know if that's possible, but...
No, Maggie, look, you really hit the nail on the head. You really did. Because the world is upside down. And look, this is the change in the Democratic Party. Remember, look, it's not to make it a political issue. It's like saying the sky is blue. Washington, D.C. is a completely Democrat-run city. Boston is a Democrat-run city. New York is a Democrat-run city. Baltimore is a Democrat-run city. I mean, I could go on. Cleveland, Chicago, Atlanta, Los Angeles. I could go on and on. And crime is out of control. It's just out of control. Why? Because, and this is George Soros in particular, he funded these prosecutors who are soft on crime, deliberately soft on crime. And so the Democrats came up with a philosophy, which they really then amplified after the George Floyd riots, which is that the problem are not the criminals. The problem is the police. The police are the racists. The police need to be defunded. In fact, even literally, they want to abolish prisons. Like, to jail someone is quote unquote racist or discriminatory. So you think how insane that is? Here, look, Mamdani, he's going to win the mayor. I'm telling you right now, he's going to be the next mayor of New York. I don't think there's any way they can stop him now. So they're trying everything, but he looks like he's unstoppable. And he's got now acolytes that are spreading in blue cities. I mentioned in Seattle, a Marxist Mamdani disciple just knocked off the Democrat mayor incumbent. She's running on a Mamdani ticket. What's her ticket? Completely defund the police. If there's a domestic dispute, like domestic violence, you send in social workers. But they want to completely cut back on police, and they want to get rid of prisons, abolish prisons. In other words, don't arrest anybody. But what do you think is going to happen? It's going to be Washington, D.C. now on steroids. So there's an attitude now that you have to coddle criminals, that they're victims of capitalism, they're victims of inequality, they're victims of oppression. It's Marxism. And so they're saying is, so you can never arrest them. It doesn't matter how much they murder, how much they loot, how much they, maim, no matter what outrageous crimes they commit. And that's the problem. Nobody's being arrested. And if they are arrested and if they are prosecuted, they only get a couple years in jail. So, and this is Trump's point, the criminals don't fear the law. Teens in particular, I mean, it's a slap on the wrist. It's a warning. They're out on bail, sometimes not even bail. They're just released, and nothing happens to them. Now, what people are kind of overlooking, there's another aspect to this. So you're completely right. The whole world is upside down. That's why, look, we've got to start getting tough again. It's got to be law and order. You commit a crime, you're going to do the time. And you got to start throwing the book at them. And I'm sorry, if you're old enough to beat big balls to a pulp and, kick him in the head while the guy's, got a broken nose and a shattered jaw. And I mean, both of his eyes, the blood was dripping out of both of his eyes. They beat him to an inch within his life. If you're old enough to do that, then you're old enough to be tried as an adult. I'm with Trump on this all the way. But people are forgetting something. Look at the chivalry of a guy like, Edward Korestein. Okay, that's his full name, big balls. Korestein. The left is even blaming him, saying, how dare he protect his girlfriend? That had they just allowed this mob, it was 10 of them, male and female, had they just allowed the mob to steal the car, they say, well, maybe nobody would have been assaulted. Well, first of all, his judgment, and I think he's right, is they were going to beat that girl up, his girlfriend. It was a date. He said bye to her. It was a Saturday night, all going into Sunday morning. She's walking towards her car. He's going to his car. And then he sees this, it's like a pack of wolves, pack of teens, this mob, and they're yelling, hey, ho, hey, B, that's our car, and they're rushing towards her. And he realizes, A, they're going to steal her car, but B, they may assault her. Hell, they may even rape her. So he rushes across the street. He could have been a coward. He could have just gone in his car, turned the key, and go, and basically leave his girlfriend to these animals. And, he would have been fine. Nothing would have happened to him. Instead, he rushes to her, and he has the good sense of mind to realize if we both go into the car and lock the door, they're going to smash the windows, they're going to drag us out of the car, they're going to beat us both to a pulp, we could be killed, and they're going to run off with the car. So he realizes my girlfriend may even be killed. So he pushes her into the car, and he tells her as the pack is running at him, they're running at him now, and he says, please lock the door. No, please, lock the door. So she's safe. So he's protecting his girl. And he's now going to meet the mob on his own. They're like a couple seconds away. And they descended on him like a pack of vultures. Now, I don't care how tough you are. I don't care how strong you are. If it's 10-on-1, you're going to lose. And you're going to lose bad. And just look at the pictures. Please don't take my word for it. Look, they finally released the pictures. I look at these pictures. I'm like, this guy looks to me like he's dead. It's like that poor woman that was knocked out at that brawl in Cincinnati. By the way, now she's got traumatic brain injury. Her doctor actually told that woman, I don't know how you're alive today. You should be dead with the beating that you took. Now, you look at Big Balls. They've shattered his nose. Look at his face. They were kicking him in the head. They were kicking him in the ribs. They were stomping the guy. A bystander, somebody saw something and called the police. Now, had the police not arrived, he's dead. And then the girlfriend is dead because they would break the windows, pull the girlfriend out, kill her, and then take the car. He put his body on the line like chivalry. He protected his girlfriend and he sacrificed himself which is to me the manly thing to do. That's what men do. And he's being excoriated. You should see the comments on social media. You want to be a tough guy? You want to be a tough guy? Well, you get what's coming to you. Why didn't you just give him the car? A, they wouldn't have been satisfied with the car. B, it probably would be two of them in the hospital and not one, if they're lucky. But this is the mentality on the left. Appease the mob. These teenagers now are entitled to this woman's car? What, they're entitled to just go around and beat people senseless because they feel like it? And by the way, just so that you know, and the witnesses and the police report all testify to this, there was no provocation. You can't even say, oh, they said something. 617-266-6868, and down the stretch we come. Rick in Quincy. Thanks for holding, Rick, and welcome.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Rick?
Not bad, not bad. The only thing that's going to change this is changing the Hot Cellar Act back. I mean, we have to bring the country back to what made it what it was. It was a unified country, and nothing against nobody, but we're bringing in people we don't know who the Christ they are, and apparently a lot of them are trouble.
Oh, I think, Rick, there's no question. You bring in all, I mean, it appears these teens were not illegal aliens, the ones that attacked, big balls. But no, there's no question. You bring in all these illegal aliens. I mean, just look at the rapes, look at the murders, look at Lake and Riley, Joycelyn Nungare. I mean, I could go on. I could do 4 hours just on listing names where you have young women who are being targeted, raped before they're being murdered. Some of them literally being dismembered. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be gross, but that's what they do. They murder, they rape, they murder, and then they just literally dismember the body. I mean, we're bringing in animals. These are MS-13 gangbangers. You're bringing in Trend or Aragua. And to me, Rick, that these Democrat mayors and Democrat governors are doing everything in their power to obstruct ICE from deporting these savages from outside, out of our country. I mean, this is treason. Really, this is treason. I don't know how these people look at themselves in the face. And, that Maryland family man, Kilmar Garcia, he's now become a cause célèbre. He's an MS-13 thug. He's a wife beater. He's a human trafficker. The guy's an MS-13 gangbanger. And they've turned this guy into a hero. So that's another problem that's, contributing to all of this out of control crime. So Rick, no, I'm with you all the way. And look, to me, that's why I go back, if to bring it full circle to the show, okay, where I started with Russia, and I want Trump to make peace. I do. I want the war between Russia and Ukraine to end, primarily because I want to see all the killing stop. But really, the constant possibility or threat of World War III, of Russia using nuclear weapons, I think we are playing with the security and safety of the world. And I truly believe that Trump deserves the Nobel. I think he deserves it now. But if he ends that war, he really deserves it. But ultimately, if people are sensing from the Kuhner man, Jeff, it's almost like you want Trump to just focus on problems at home. Yes. Yes. Because what Biden has done, just the border invasion alone, if we only have 3.5 years, we don't know what's going to happen in 2028. I mean, I think J.D. Vance is going to be the heir apparent. I think he's going to wipe out whoever the Democrats put up, but you never know. They stole it once, they can steal it again. So to me, I'm operating under the premise that we have 3.5 years. We've got to get these illegal aliens out. We've got to. Because if we don't, we're not going to have a country left. To me, that's our number one. There's other top priorities. Inflation. People have to start being able to live again. But energy independence, I could go on and on. But the number one priority for Jeff Kuhner, number one above all else, he has secured the border. He stopped the invasion. God bless him. But now these mass deportations, we've got over 20 million illegals minimum that we have to ship out of our country. So to me, that's the real battle. Mobilize the military if you have to, the National Guard if you have to. I don't care how much it costs. Hire as many ICE agents, but get it done, because that's the only way we're going to save our country. Rick, thank you very much for that call. Rich in the great state of Tennessee. Rich, I hate to do this to you. I've got 1 minute left. The floor is yours. Go.
Jeff, all you have to do is look how the left treated Daniel Penny in New York. He subdued a guy on the subway that everyone on the train said was a threat to them. And for a person, everyone, it didn't matter. They thought he was a threat, and he subdued them, and then the left went after him. And whether he was found innocent or guilty, he still had to pay, because that's the part that they love to do. It's I forget the term, but, they lawfare.
Yeah, I mean, he had to get a lawyer. I mean, it cost him a ton of money, the time, the stigma. He was vilified in the media. By the way, he says he gets death threats now all the time. I mean, so they destroyed his life. And he's a hero. He's a hero. And it's like, Big Balls. He's a hero. Big Balls is a hero. He saved his girlfriend. And they're vilifying Big Balls. So think about how sick these people are, Rich. They side with these thugs, these criminals, against the innocent victims who try to stand up to them.